name is Dalton Parker, and this is my video for PFTR 1220. Today we're going to be going over two things, the myofascial lines and functional lines. To start, we're going to go over myofascial lines. There are four of them: the superficial front line, the superficial back line, the lateral line, and the spiral line. Let's start with the superficial front line, or SFL. The superficial front line runs along the anterior side of the human body and connects at the base of the skull. In the diagram, you can see behind me what I'm talking about. Some of the primary muscles of the SFL are the sternocleidomastoid, sternalis, rectus abdominis, the quadriceps muscles, the tibialis anterior, and the extensor digitorum. The posterior function of the SFL is to balance out the superficial back line. It also helps to provide tensile support from the top of the lift parts of the skeleton, which extend forward from the line of gravity. An example of this would be your nose. The muscles of the SFL also protect the frontal surface of the human body. The tensile strength of the SFL myofascia protects the viscera of the ventral cavities. The movement function of the SFL is to create flexion of the trunk and hips, and extension at the knee and dorsiflexion at the foot. The SFL is comprised mainly of a larger portion of fast twitch muscle fibers. Moving on, we look at the superficial backline, or SBL. The SBL begins at the bottom of the toes and runs along the posterior side of the human body. You can see this in the diagram behind me. Some of the primary muscles in the SBL are the plantar fascia, the Achilles tendon, the gastrocnemius muscles, the hamstrings, the sacrotuberous ligament, the lumbosacral fascia, the erector spinae, and the gavia aponeurotica. The posterior function of the SBL is to support the human body in extension, which also prevents curl into flexion, which is essentially known as a slouch. Prolonged contraction of these muscles require a higher portion of slow twitch muscle fibers. Constant postural function also requires heavier sheets and bands in the fascia. The movement function of the SBL is to create extension and hyperextension, except in the knee and ankle where it creates flexion. In human development, the SBL lifts the baby's head from flexion to where the child achieves stability, leading into standing. Moving on, we look at the lateral line. The main purpose of the lateral line is frontal plane stability. The primary muscles in the lateral line are the sternocleidomastoid, the splenius capitis, the intercostal muscles, the obliques, the gluteus maximus, the TFL, IT band, proneus longus, and proneus brevis. The postural function of the lateral line are to balance the left and right activity. It also helps to mediate forces in other lines. The last thing it does is it helps to stabilize the limbs while the upper body reacts. The movement function of the lateral line is to help in a lateral bend, which means descending when standing and accelerating when perpendicular to gravity in the neck, trunk, hip. This means abduction and eversion. The last thing that we're going to look at is the spiral line, or SL. The spiral line loops around the body in a helix pattern. It starts at the skull, joining on one side, and crosses the back to the opposite shoulder, then across the front of the hip, down to the knee, running to the foot, and then back along all the way back up to the base of the skull. You can see this in the diagram behind me. The primary muscles of the SL are the serratus anterior, the obliques, the TFL, the biceps femoris muscles, tibialis anterior, and the proneus longus muscles. The posterior function of the SL is to maintain balance across all planes. It also helps to connect the foot arches with the pelvic angle to help the knee in tracking when walking. Imbalance in the SL creates, compensates, and maintains alignment with the twists, rotation, and lateral shifts in the human body. The movement function of the SL is to create and mediate spirals and rotations in the body. It also helps to modulate strains in the arch of the foot. Now that we have a good idea of myofascial lines, let's take a look at functional lines. There are two different functional lines in the human body, the front functional line and the back functional line. Let's first look at the front functional line. The front functional line begins at the pectoralis major and connects to the lower ribs, where it has a myofascial continuity with the rectus abdominis as well as at the pubic bones, and then down via the abductor longus muscles. Next, we have the back functional line. The back functional line begins with the latissimus dorsi and follows down the lumbosacral fascia and crosses the gluteus maximus and follows down the IT bans and vastus lateralis. I hope this has shed a little light on the subject. Thank you.